prepared by the Independent Legal Mission on the Peace Process in Turkey. And I think you all have the report. If not, you can have it there printed. And the colleagues and the press members who are joining us today online, you will be able to access the report also online. We will publish it after this press conference. The report comes at a moment of considerable political and legal significance. It reflects the work of an international delegation of lawyers and legal organizations who visited Turkey to assess the current phase of the peace process from an independent, rights-based, and legal perspective. The Independent Legal Mission was established under the auspices of the European Association of Lawyers for Democracy and World Human Rights and the Association for Democracy and International Law, with the institutional participation of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, the Union of Italian Panel Chambers, and ESCULCA. The delegation brought together lawyers and representatives of legal and human rights institutions from different countries, each contributing their own professional experience to a common concern: how law can support the conditions for a just and lasting peace. The need for such a mission is clear. The Kurdish question in Turkey has never been a matter that can be addressed through security policies alone. It's bound up with questions of identity, language, political participation, local democracy, freedom of expression and association, criminal law, and fundamental rights. Any serious peace process, therefore, requires more than political declarations. It requires legal guarantees, democratic oversight, public legitimacy, and the meaningful participation of those affected by the conflict. Of course, we are deeply concerned about recent developments in Turkey. The rule of law, judicial independence, freedom of expression, political participation, anything related to democracy itself and fundamental rights are all under serious pressure. Yet these concerns do not make the pursuit of peace less important and urgent. They make it even more necessary. In the absence of peace, repression and anti-democratic practices do not remain isolated violations. They risk becoming part of a wider reality of conflict and war, a reality that wounds society as a whole and further narrows the space for rights, democracy, and justice. For this reason, the delegation and the organizations that supported and organized this delegation, we understand peace as a process rather than a single moment or a single declaration. Disarmament and the end of armed confrontation are, of course, essential parts of such a process, but they cannot stand alone. A lasting peace also requires democratization. And of course, when we focus on the context in Turkey, there is one other precondition here we have to mention and we cannot ignore: the right to hope. Giving Abdullah Öcalan the opportunity to play his role in his significant and historical moment is one of the most important conditions to be able to access a lasting peace in Turkey. So the report being presented today assesses the current process with attention to both its opportunities and its shortcomings. And it recognizes the establishment of a parliamentary framework as an important institutional development, but at the same time, it underlines the need for that framework to become more inclusive, more concrete, and more capable of guiding implementation. The report addresses a wide range of issues: disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, the need for a clear legal framework, criminal and anti-terror legislation, compliance with the judgments of the Constitutional Court and the European Court of Human Rights, local governance, gender perspectives, civil society participation, and the broader democratic reforms required for a sustainable and just peace. As lawyers, we know that our responsibility does not end with the publication of one report. If anything, it becomes more concrete. Law has a role not only in documenting violations, but also in defining safeguards, insisting on accountability, creating legal certainty, and defending the possibility that conflicts can be resolved through democratic politics rather than violence. So we will hear today from the members of the delegation who were in Turkey and had several and serious discussions with different parties who are working for peace within their institutions. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Burka Ayatsa, who is the co-president of European Association of Lawyers for Democracy and World Human Rights, to present the mission findings with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all, and thank you for joining us. Well, our mission arrived to Turkey with one primary objective. It was to listen. We arrived in a very special moment when the National Solidarity, Brotherhood and Democracy report was presented in the parliament, and so main of the report is focused on that moment. We met a wide range of actors from across society and sought to understand both the opportunities and the challenges facing the current process. One message that we heard repeatedly was that the Parliamentary Commission represents an important institutional development. And we agreed that the Commission has created a democratic and parliamentary space for discussion that previously never existed. But at the same time, there is a broad understanding that this is only a first step and it's not comprehensive. Many stakeholders welcome those consultation efforts, but also express concerns about limited participation in the society and the underrepresentation of women in the process. Well, it was stressed also that the sustainable peace process requires broader ownership across the society. And we would like to stress this. A recurring message is that the Kurdish issue cannot be exclusively, and we agreed completely, through a security framework, the so-called free territory Turkey. While ending violence is essential, well, accurately defining the nature of the problem is a prerequisite for any successful outcome. And ending violence is essential, but many stakeholders emphasize that the importance of other issues that are at the root of the conflict, like the language, national identity, democratic participation, cultural recognition, and equal citizenship. The Kurdish issue, the Kurdish identity is at the core of the conflict. And we should take that in account. And not only responding to the symptoms of the conflict, this conflict will be resolved. We need to go to the core causes of the conflict if we want to resolve this conflict. One of the strongest concerns we heard relates to the disarmament, the demobilization of the PKK. While discussions on disarmament have advanced, there is still limited clarity regarding what comes next. Questions remain regarding the legal status, reintegration, and return and future opportunities for the members of the armed groups. Many stakeholders consider this is a central question for the credibility of the process. The case of representativity is also key. While them represent the aspirations of the Kurdish population, if you want to deal with these issues of disarmament and reintegration, you need to talk with those that are directly involved on that. So talking with the for the resolution of the conflict also. And another example shows that third-party involvements in these processes are very helpful for the development of the process. So we encourage also the involvement of third parties that can support the process. Another issue consistently raises was the relation between peace and democratization and the interconnectivity of those issues. Confidence in democratic institutions, judicial decisions, local governance, and political participations were all identified, and we identify them as important elements for the long-term peace. Significantly, we consider that the execution of the Constitutional Court and the European Court of Human Rights decisions is key if we want to advance in this process. Another issue, and we had many discussions on this, is the situation and the concern on the situation of Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. Regardless of political views, it is clear for all interlocutors, and is recognized the crucial role that Mr. Öcalan plays and has played opening the current phase of the process. And regarding him, it's clear that he's a relevant key actor for its future development. And we all know that, both us, Turkish society, and the Turkish government also. Against this background, our concern is that there has not been significant step taken regarding his situation. Many stakeholders note that this issue is absent in the Commission report itself. And there is no reference about the non-implementation of the European Court of Human Rights judgments regarding to O'Callaghan, and as it has been said, of the right of hope of Mr. O'Callaghan. This is not only a legal issue, but this is also an issue related to the process itself, the confidence building of the process among all the actors, and a key element to ensure that this process ends in a lasting and just peace. So we encourage in that sense the international actors, the European Union, to commit to force a change in the situation of Mr. O'Callaghan. Also, it was highlighted by many actors that developments in neighboring countries continue to shape expectations regarding the process. The success or failure of these efforts will have implications beyond Turkey. We are talking about a process that has implications in all the region. In conclusion, the overall message we bring is one of hope, but also of caution. Hope because there is a real opportunity to consolidate peace after decades of conflict. Caution because trust remains fragile and important questions remain unresolved. And trust is not based in words, trust is based in facts. This opportunity should not be taken for granted. In a region marked by conflict and instability, progress towards a peaceful and democratic solution will be of immense significance. For these reasons, we believe that the international community, and the European Union especially, and the different bodies of the European Union, should remain attentive, supportive, and constructively engaged in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Urko. Now I'm giving the floor to my colleague, Eleonora Scala, who is representing International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute. She will present the recommendations from the report.
Thank you, Joran. Good afternoon, everyone. Before diving into the specific recommendations of our report, I also want to add some considerations around the spirit in which they are offered, as I think it emerged quite clearly from the Urko's presentation of the findings. The mission assessment is that this peace process represents something real and significant, not only for ending decades-long conflict, but also for broader democratic progress and human rights protection in Turkey, with potential positive impact for the whole region. And so the stakes are high, and the opportunity demands serious attention and resources mobilization. Against this backdrop, our recommendations are offered in a constructive spirit. They draw on our engagement with a broad range of stakeholders, and they are built on a clear awareness of how of the complexity of all the different layers to the process. So our objective in mind was really to create the enabling conditions for dialogue through a phased approach, a building block approach. And while most of the recommendations are clearly directed at the Turkish government, we believe that the international community also has a role to play, as you've heard already. Turkey indicates preference for conducting the process as an internal matter, and the mission respects that position. But at the same time, we consider that meaningful space exists for constructive international involvement, and this can take many different forms. It can go from, for instance, provision of technical expertise in the disarmament, the mobilization and reintegration process, technical assistance also in legal and policy reform, for instance, through some of the specialized body of the EU or Council of Europe institutions, assistance for advocacy and human rights compliance in terms of also implementation of the European Court of Human Rights judgments. And at the same time, international actors could offer their services as guarantors or independent monitors of already agreed frameworks. So we encourage the international community to keep the spotlight on this process, to continue to build momentum and ensure that this window of opportunity does not close. and also to remain open to different forms of engagements in the understanding that international experience and expertise can strengthen domestic ownership of the process and are not a substitute to it. And here I would like to say with specific reference to the European Union. Of course, the EU has a clear interest in this process, firstly because of democracy and human rights, and as I said, the opportunity they offer for Turkey, but also in a more transactional manner for counterterrorism, regional stability, migration. And so a rights-based settlement would serve both European values and European strategic interests. And it's clear, for instance, that minority rights and minority protection are preconditions in Turkey's accession path to the EU. And so the EU involvement could be grounded in this push for democratization. Peace without democracy will not be either attainable or sustainable in this context. And if the EU remains on the sidelines, the shape of this process will increasingly be determined by other regional powers who are pursuing their own geopolitical agendas that are not necessarily aligned with European values. And right now in the current political landscape, we believe the European Union cannot afford to cede that space. And a coherent European Union strategy that engages constructively on these peace processes, offer services for democratization and human rights reform will be essential to remain a relevant actor in a process that will have an important impact on the EU. So with this in mind, I will start by presenting some recommendations that we offered on the process design, starting from participation of civil society and transparency. We've heard of how the creation of the commission was considered a fundamental institutional step to move the process away from the shadow of back-channel negotiations. Further progress on these would entail formal and more structured and more meaningful consultation mechanisms with civil society. At the same time, regular progress reports on the peace process would go a long way towards building public trust. Greater involvement of women and meaningful involvement of women is needed, and also in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. So we want to see women involved in negotiations, in political dialogue, in reintegration programs. This should be encouraged. Regarding representation issues, there is, as we've heard, broad recognition of the role of Mr. Öcalan and the relevance in this process, and this is across the political spectrum. Also, Bacelli in mid-May made some declarations very clear about the importance of Öcalan role and figure for the process to continue. And so for dialogue to advance, his detention conditions need to be revised, at least to enable him to communicate with all the relevant actors to advance this process and to communicate also in a confidential manner. Right now at Imrali, every meeting that he has is, there's the head of the detention facility attending. The conditions for him to choose with whom to meet are severely limited. And we will also want to see him being able to communicate his messages with the public also more openly. Right now, his capacity to negotiate is severely limited, and really the legitimacy of the process and the possibility of the process to continue are at stake if this doesn't change. And we also would like to draw attention, and my colleague will speak more on this, to the binding European Court of Human Rights jurisprudence, including the 2014 Right to Hope judgment, where the EU calls on the Council of Europe calls on Turkey to provide the possibility of conditional release or a review mechanism of detention for Öcalan and for all those serving aggravated life sentences. So this would actually be implementation of a binding obligation on Turkey on top of an important measure to advance the process. Moving on now to the DDR framework, the disarmament, the mobilization, and reintegration. In terms of sequencing, what we recommend is that legal and security guarantees for former PKK members accompany or precede disarmament. At the same time, disarmament through an independent verification mechanism would be essential for building trust on all sides. And here there is, for instance, an opening for international involvement through technical assistance or independent observers in this specific phase of the process. At the same time, in the short term, executive and administrative legal instrument could also be used to enable confidence building while a broader legal framework is developed. This would mean releasing political prisoners, lifting existing entry bans, or using decree mechanisms to remove early procedural obstacles. And at the same time, for instance, the release of some of the political prisoners could stem directly again from the implementation of binding decisions from the European Court of Human Rights and from the Constitutional Court. This would be a clear first step, and here specifically we would like to call our attention to the Demirtas, Kavala, and Öcalan judgments from the European Court of Human Rights, but also from the Constitutional Court Atalay decision. And this falls within a broader democratization process that also needs to accompany the disarmament, the mobilization, and reintegration one. So another important step in this process would be expanding democratic participation and political rights. And this should happen across different sectors. First of all, a review of the political party legislation to ensure that the rules concerning party closure meet strict democratic standards. So closure should be an exception under defined circumstances and not a tool for political contestation. Strengthening local democratic governance by restoring the authority of the elected local representatives in the Kurdish municipalities who were removed under the trusteeship system would also be an important first step in this regard. And then we also recommend the reviewal or repeal of anti-terrorism legislation in order to bring it in line with international standards and ensuring that also political actors can participate in democratic processes without risking undue criminalization. And there were also some calls from EU institutions in this regard. And we also have a set of recommendations on cultural and linguistic rights. We've heard that the report from the Parliamentary Commission doesn't place enough emphasis on that. We recommend the development of policies that acknowledge the linguistic and cultural diversity of Turkey's population. So legal and policy frameworks for mother tongue education, use of Kurdish in cultural life, and also for access to local public services would be initial steps in this recognition that citizenship is inclusive and pluralistic. And then finally, on transitional justice, we recommend the establishment of an independent Truth, Justice and Accountability Commission that is mandated to investigate and force disappearances, political killings, torture, and other serious human rights violations that occurred committed by all parties to the conflict. And of course, this commission should be adequately resourced and empowered in order to carry out its work and paired with a program that includes different form of reparation from restitution, compensation, and symbolic measures. All these recommendations are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. So progress in one area creates space and pushes forward another area. The impact is not to be analyzed individually, but assessed through an holistic lens, taking into account their contribution to the creation of an environment of trust, of legal certainty, and democratic resilience. And I will stop here. Thank you, Joran.
Thank you, Eleonora. As we mentioned at the beginning, this mission was organized in February 2026, which was marking the first year of the peace process, following the call coming from Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. But of course, this process is still going on, but the report is focusing on a particular period, a year. But since the delegation's main aim and idea is taking this responsibility of being peace observers and contributors in a sustainable manner, we thought that it is also good to update you about the current situation and the current developments. So now I will give the floor to our colleague Mari Powers from the Peace and Justice Association. Please, Mari.
Thank you so much. So yes, I will just give a brief overview of some of the most recent developments in the process, going from March until this month, until early June. So following the Commission's report, key actors across the political spectrum described the process as entering into a second phase, requiring both concrete legislative and administrative reforms to implement the Commission's recommendations. However, what we've seen over the recent months is that concerns have increasingly come out that the process is stalling in a way or has reached a point of stagnation. At the same time, developments in Turkey have revealed a persistent lack of space for the exercise of democratic politics and principles of rule of law. In the end of March, the Dem Party Imrali delegation met with Abdullah Öcalan together with state officials and reportedly discussed a roadmap for the implementation of a temporary legal framework as it is discussed in the Commission's report. According to subsequent accounts, this roadmap envisaged the preparation of a draft law by mid-April, consultations with Öcalan and other actors, and the adoption of key legislative measures by the end of April. However, none of these steps materialized. Throughout April, no concrete legislative initiative was introduced, nor was the Dem Party able to go and visit with Mr. Öcalan. As a result, concerns increasingly grew that the process had entered into a period of stagnation to a degree. We can also say that to an extent in this period, as there were no meetings again with Mr. Öcalan, that conditions of isolation had once again been enforced. More broadly speaking, a growing perception started to emerge both within Kurdish political actors and the general society that the process was advancing asymmetrically, that you had steps being taken on the part of Kurdish society and movements, yet no corresponding legal reforms on the part of the current administration. On the 5th of May, 1 year after the PKK's dissolution Congress, a press conference was held by the leadership of the Kurdish movement in which they stated that legal steps must be taken as soon as possible and that Abdullah Öcalan's status as a key representative and negotiator within this process, that it must be clarified to a degree, that some kind of official status must be granted. The statement further expressed that although the Kurdish movement had taken many steps over the last year and had shown a commitment in favor of a democratic and peaceful resolution, no significant process had emerged and reciprocal steps on the part of the authorities. On the same day, we also saw important steps being taken towards the institutionalization of the process and on the parliamentary level. MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli proposed the creation of a coordination office for peace process and politicization in order for the process to continue, which included an official coordinating role for Abdullah Öcalan. On behalf of Dem Party, co-chair Tuncer Bahri Khan, meanwhile proposed a peace monitoring and follow-up council as another proposal towards how this process could continue through institutional forms. On the 18th of May, Mr. Bahçeli again reiterated his proposal for the creation of such a coordination office and published a roadmap for the continuation of the process in Turkey. However, this process was considered narrower in scope than earlier expectations. And in this framework, Öcalan's status as coordinator would be strictly limited in a way to the dissolution process and disarmament process of the organization. This coordination role would also not entail, for example, the recognition of Abdullah Öcalan as a key figure for democratization in Turkey, more broadly speaking, or recognition as a leader for the Kurdish society. Further objections were raised by many actors on this roadmap proposed by Mr. Bahçeli, in that it consists of a significant departure from previous roadmaps discussed, for example, at the end of March between government officials, the Dem Party Imrali delegation, and Mr. Öcalan. Concerns were raised that the continued predominance of counterterrorism language risks reducing the process to a security issue rather than addressing the political and democratic dimensions. Meanwhile, to speak a little bit about the broader political context in Turkey at the moment, concerns remain around democratic backsliding, particularly as it relates to attempts to silence political opposition. In May, an appeals court annulled the CHP's 2023 Congress, removing party leader Özgür Özel and reinstating a former chairman, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Shortly after, there were also raids on the CHP headquarters in Ankara after a multi-day confrontation with those loyal to Özgür Özel, the former chairman. Riot police reportedly entered the building using tear gas and rubber bullets against those that were there. So what we can say from this political situation is that it's one where we see quite delicate balance between the possibility of a peace process, an emergence of a move towards democratization and the opening of political space, and on the contrary, efforts towards suppressing this to a degree. These developments matter because also any sustainable peace process, it depends on the existence of functioning democratic institutions, respect for political pluralism, and confidence in the rule of law. Democratic backsliding, restrictions on political opposition risk undermining also public trust and in the broader environment in which peace negotiations are able to function. A potentially important breakthrough came on the 24th of May, when Dem Party Imrali delegation was again able to visit Mr. Öcalan. This was followed by a family visit on the event of a religious holiday on the 27th of May. And following these meetings, Pervin Buldan, who is a member of the Imrali delegation, shared that a draft temporary framework law for the process would be introduced following the recommendations of the Commission before the end of the parliamentary session in July. This framework law would consist of 7 or 8 articles and would be enacted as a one-time measure in which former PKK members would be able to come back to Turkey within a designated period. It was further suggested that after this law would be introduced, further democratization reform packages would follow. To speak also about another significant element of the Commission report that is where there's been developments in the last months. The Commission's report focused quite heavily on the implementation of ECHR decisions and questions of rule of law. Council of Europe institutions over the last year and since the process began have on multiple occasions highlighted the ongoing peace and democratic society process and this commission that was created in the Turkish parliament as a key avenue for democratization in Turkey, more broadly speaking. However, inaction or passivity from the Council of Europe in this sense also risks enabling Turkey to leave such violations and existing issues unaddressed, while speaking in theory of a peace process that's ongoing. In May, Turkey submitted 2 Rule 8.2 submissions to the Committee of Ministers regarding the cases of Kavala and Demirtas, both cases under advanced supervision at the moment. In both submissions, the process was very heavily highlighted to the point where there are sections from the Commission's report that were directly included. However, there was no concrete information given as to how the process would impact the implementation of court decisions in such cases. In this regard, the case of Abdullah Öcalan also remains particularly significant. The 2014 judgment of the European Court of Human Rights found that aggravated life imprisonment, what Öcalan is charged with, without any realistic prospect of release, violates Article 3 of the Convention and, in short, the concept of the right to hope. Turkey is supposed to submit an action plan detailing how they will make the necessary changes in law for the right to hope by the end of June this year. So the deadline is rapidly approaching. And implementing this decision would be important both in the context of the current process, in terms of addressing the extended regime of intense isolation that Öcalan has been subject to for the last 27 years, and establishing a legal basis to start working towards his release, as well as benefiting thousands of other prisoners in Turkey that are currently detained under the same charges. So in short, what we can say is that today the process stands at a really critical juncture. The central question is no longer whether a political opening exists, but whether this opening will be translated into concrete legal guarantees, democratic reforms, and institutional mechanisms capable of sustaining peace and working towards a just peace. In this context, as my colleagues already mentioned, creating the conditions for Abdullah Öcalan to participate meaningfully in this process remains a central concern for many actors, and increasingly a prominent issue within public debate. However, how this question is addressed is something that may prove to be one of the key determinants for the success of the process, more broadly speaking. And I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. As we mentioned several times, that this peace process is not only about Turkey or the region, but it's like very much related to the European Union itself. Like, so it's also about our common principles and future. And today we are very happy and thankful to MEP Ana Miranda Paz, who is here with us. And I want to give the floor to her. And I also want to inform you that after her closing statements, we will open the floor for the questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you for coming to the European Parliament to introduce and present this important report on the independent legal mission on the peace process in Turkey, Kurdistan. It's not the first time that you are here. I know a lot of these faces. I'm also happy that in the report, a Galician organization is working with, because Skulka is an important organization in my country, in Galicia. I'm not from Spain, I'm from Galicia. And that is important also, the names of the countries, the names of the spaces, and they are very involved in the rights. And I'm happy that they participating with you also in this post-mission report. Concerning our position here in the European Parliament and supporting this kind of initiative, I want also to thank Farouk and the HDP, now with other name because of the ban of Turkey, and also the members of the delegation and my dear colleague Luis that is there and give you the entry to the Parliament and work also with you. And Stefano also, because Stefano is a fundamental piece of the European Parliament for years, working for Kurdish issues. I stand here today as a witness and ally also because we believe in the human rights, in the reconstruction, and also in the peace process. This sustainable peace process is not the position, is not the position of the European Union. Is for that we in the European Parliament with other groups, for the members of the left and the S&D and also Renew Party, we stand and supporting the peace process, the democratic and the peaceful and sustainable peace process. And it's for that we were in some observation missions too. We were in the trial of Mr. Kavala. We were in the trial of Mr. Demirtas in Strasbourg, accompanying the families. And also we were in the trial of Mr. Demirtas in Ankara to observe in these missions the undemocratic process to these two main cultural and political actors of the Turkey issue, Kurdish situation. Also, we sent some letters for the liberation of Mr. Öcalan and also supporting the campaigns for years, not for 1 year, 4 years. You, for the Kurdish people, we want to send a message. They have lived for a lot of decades of conflict, displacement, banned their language, banned, and also they should left the village because of the war, lost their families, persecution, and for us it's too much, and it's not only an internal issue of Turkey, it's an internal issue of the European Union because of the consequence in all the region and also in all the peace process. Concerning the respect of human rights and also the respect of the democracy, I think this report is very important to send to all the members of the Turkey delegation of the European Parliament, also to the Commission, as you mentioned before, and to send parliamentary questions to the Commission, because this report is the base to have a real peaceful, democratic, and sustainable peace process. You work it a lot, you are very involved, and we are only the bridge for work with you and also to do the pressure in the European Parliament as politicians, supporting the Kurdish people and supporting the peace process, also for some part of the Turkish population that also are with us and that we defend in the past, as Mr. Kavala and other political prisoners, because the mention of this report concerning the political prisoners is the real word. They are political prisoners, and Turkey has political prisoners, and it's for that we asked in the past for the suspension of the agreement with Turkey, the agreement of the European Union, because Turkey doesn't comply the human rights conventions. Now we are in another moment in the region. We are in another moment because of the war of Mr. Trump. We are also in another situation by Israel. We are in a different world, and I think it's the opportunity and the moment to introduce and to push for this important report of the independent legal mission of the peace process concerning the European Union. I want to thank you all the work. We are always here, so we are not, it's not necessary to combine us because we are combined, but we need to combine the other groups, and we are available to help in any case with other maps. Today is not a good day for the meetings because, you know, some of us, we have other meetings, other missions, but I couldn't be there, and I'm happy to be there to support the peace, to support the democracy, to support the right of a people to be in a country, or to belong to a country, or to be independent of other country, and the right of peoples, as the Kurdish people, to stand in peace for the future and for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for very much for this encouraging words and for for your kind words about the report also. So now I will open the floor for questions. And I see that we have one, please.
No, yeah. I mistakenly touched it last time and I was over there recording. The camera was on me. No, I'm not even pressing the button. I'm Res from Nucha TV and master's graduate from BSOG. And my question is regarding the name of the peace process through the Turkish media in comparison to the Kurdish media. And it's something that, despite the fact that the situation in Turkey regarding the other parties, for example, CHP, have been mentioned, but the name hasn't been mentioned, or at least I missed it because of trying to record for my actual journalism work. On Turkish side, they call the peace process deterrorization process of Turkey, which is frankly, and in the most frank fashion to say, it's quite shameful to hear that from Turkish side is not a peace process, just based on the name. While on the Kurdish side, it's a totally different name. But I've heard in almost every speech here today, the importance of participation of the third party, especially from the European side, because Europe has been a pillar in keeping Turkey at bay, not just against the Kurds, but against other Turkish parties inside Turkey. CHP is one of them. If not for the EU and the European laws and regulations, the situation with CHP would have been even worse. It would have been just Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. It would have been most of the other leaders. What can a third party, especially on the European side, do about the name of the process and to make sure that it is not delivered to the Kurdish society, specifically in Turkey, as just deteriorization of a society that has been there at least for 1,000 years, and while on the state's part is, well, named as it is.
Thank you. You would like to say something?
Thank you for your comment on the name of the process, and you've actually hit the spot on something that also our mission has noted with concern: the framing of the process as terror-free Turkey, rather than perhaps adopting the name also of the work of the commission, the Nationality, Brotherhood, and Solidarity Commission, which would be a better framing that goes beyond this strict security lens, which is something very problematic regarding the narrative surrounding the process, because it really focuses only, yes, on the terrorist side, on the security lens, strict focus on the mobilization and disarmament process, rather than addressing the underlying issues of recognition of identity, of cultural rights, of minority right, and of the right of Kurdish people to also access their services, as I said before, in mother tongue, and have a recognition of their essential cultural rights in a pluralistic society. In terms of what can be done by European Union actors, in particular, given the venue where we are having this discussion, as mentioned before, the push from the EU, given the values that are the underlying values of the Union, could surely be to push this democratic angle, ensure that it stays front and central in the process, and that broader questions regarding democratization, respect for human rights, and as we've mentioned, respect for the binding nature of European Court of Human Rights judgments, and so on, continues to be at the center of the process and continues to move simultaneously in the discussion, along with the question of security guarantees and all of that for mere PKK members. I don't know if colleagues have something to add.
Yes, well, this is an issue, but I will say that a peace process is not defined by how it is named, but is defined by the content and the outcome. And so this is open. And of course, the Turkish government wants to define it as a pre-terrorism Turkey, but it will be defined by the content and the outcome. So I would say that this is something that we need to work on. Both sides, Kurdish people, the Turkish people, and international actors, because we know that a lasting peace on the Turkish-Kurdish issue requires not only to rise or to challenge the symptoms of the conflict, but the roots of the conflict, to pass from a negative peace process to a positive process where the content is also defined. So I would say that not focus too much on the name, but focus so much more on the content and try to push hard so that at the end the outcome is positive for the Kurdish people and the Turkish people also.
I will just add one more point. The infringement process against Turkey is going on for ages. And 3 main cases, but we know that there are more than, let's say, 300 pilot cases, but 3 main cases. Like one is the case of Öcalan, like we are mentioning it as the 2014 judgment, and Kavala case and Demirtaş case. They are the main cases. And this process is really, if you focus on a problematic process, this is the problematic process. It's slow. It doesn't take concrete measures. And now Turkey has another tool to manipulate the process, by mentioning the peace process itself, like not for the Öcalan judgment only, but when it comes to the Kavala case, when it comes to the other cases. So I think to be able to support the peace process, and I agree with Urko, it's not important how it is called. I understand that it is important emotionally, it's important, like I can understand, I have the empathy with the question, but since our aim is achieving something, I do not care how it is called, but I believe that this infringement process is important to push Turkey to make some concrete steps, because this is the mechanism we have, which can end up with some sanctions, right? Which some stronger decisions. So I think, like, as we are lawyers, this is a venue that we prefer to focus on, like when it comes to Europe. And any other question? Yeah, please.
Thank you so much, but I want to speak Kurdish. Is okay for you? اشتی اما دزانین اشتی بەشێکی دانەبراوە لە پرۆسەیەکی کۆمەڵایەتی ئەی دەبێت ئاشتی لە ژێرەوە لە ناو کۆمەڵگەوە دەست پێ بکات ئەگەر ئاشتی دانەبەزێتە ناو کۆمەڵگە گڤەرماند و بەرپرسەکان و حیزبە سیاسیەکان ناتوانن ئاشتی جێبەجێکەن بە تایبەتی لەگەڵ پرسیەکە کە پرسی کووردە زیاتر لە 100 ساڵە ئەم نەتەوەیە بەرکردنی بەسەرەوە فەرز دەکرێ جینۆساید دەکرێت من پرسیارەکەمەوەیە زۆربەی خەڵکی کوردستان پیان وایە تورکیا جددی نییە لە ئاشتی تورکیا یاریەکە لەگەڵ قەزی کوردیە نازانم ئێوە پێتان وایە تورکیا جددیە لە پرۆسی ئاشتی یا مجەڕەدەوەیە کە دەیە پلەیکە لەگەڵ کوردە Thank you.
So in simplest form, the question. In simplest form, the question was regarding that the peace process is not just some promises and words by leaders and the statesmen, but rather a cultural thing that goes down top to bottom to all the sectors of the society. And in this manner, do you believe that Turkey's position right now in the peace process is rather a very truthful position where they are trying to build this peace down to all the sectors of the society, Turkish and Kurdish society inside Turkey, or rather just trying to trick the Kurdish society, specifically the Kurdish society in Turkey, into giving up their rights?
Thank you in the Basque language for the comments. Well, I think that we are talking about a peace process, and we are talking about engagement between sides that has been combating each other for a long time. And a peace process means that you probably get out from the boxing square and you sit down with the chess game that keeps on being a fighting. And this needs to be understood. And of course, its sides try to obtain as much as possible in this process. So the key is how do you convince much more people to get involved and achieve as much more as possible. And that's why in our recommendations, we highlight the need of involvement of civil society much more, civil organizations opening the process to the society. It is key. Of course, it's not going to be easy. And you haven't talked about trust also. Well, trust is not based in words. Trust is based in facts. That's why we also stress the need of confidence building measures. That's why we talk about the need of changing the situation of Mr. Ocalan. It's not about because it's key, because it's also because it will mean a fact, something real, concrete, that can change the situation. So that's why it is important. But we need to not forget that peace processes are always battlefields with other means that keeps on being a battle. So on the terms, the key is to win the heart and minds, not only of the Kurdish people that it's really there, but also of the international community, etc. So I think that it's an ongoing process, and the outcome is not established. It's going to be based on what the forces in Turkey, Kurdish forces, and how also the international community is able and capable of supporting a positive and lasting peace in Turkey and Kurdistan, which we believe it is in favor not only for the Kurds, it's in favor for the region, that has been said, and it is also in favor in this case for Europe. But as I say, it's an open scenario. Thank you.
Any other questions? Please.
Thank you. Thank you for your very good speech. The other question, but it's not from me. It's actually from a friend who's a MP of Iraqi parliament, and he is a lawyer too. And he had no opportunity to attend this conference like this, but he asked me to ask you his question. It's about to how to support your effort. Actually, he said we are in the Iraqi parliament, and he is a super advisor in the foreign ministry of Iraq. So he asked how we can support this effort in our diplomatic relations, in our works in this regard, how we can support you, which point is very important to focus on. So he asked about this only. So he asked me to ask this question on behalf of him. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a very important question. And as we try to mention today, we do not see this work itself as a close work. You know, our aim when we organized this mission, our aim was not just publishing a post report and explaining what had happened, but our true aim is supporting this process until it can be realized, you know, and as Urko mentioned, yeah, legally, I mean, you know, as Urko mentioned, we believe that this is a long process, like we know that, you know, and I think in the upcoming weeks, there will be some venues where we will be able to come together with our colleagues around the world who are focusing on the same aim with us, you know, like supporting a process that is needed for everybody, not just for Kurds in Turkey or in other part of the region, but everybody, I believe, in this world, let's say, not in just in Europe. So I think we will be able to give concrete answers to this question some weeks after. Yeah.
And in short term, to disseminate as much as possible the report.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. And do we have any other questions? Yeah, please.
My question in Arabic. In Arabic. I يعني احنا استبشرنا بعملية السلام في تركيا بين الصراع الدامي اللي استمر 50 عاما بين الأتراك والكرد. لكن هناك يعني احنا كمراقبين من بعيد نشوف انه ما في وضوح بالنسبة للدولة التركية. ما هي الحقوق اللي لازم انها تعلن عنها تركيا حتى تطمنا احنا كمقاتلين وكشعب وككرد ومحبين للسلام؟ ماذا تريد ان تعطيهم للكرد؟ تغيير الدستور، ثقافة، الحفاظ على الهوية الكردية، اللغة الكردية. نلاحظ أيضا أنه هذه العملية تظهر بالشدة على الإعلام ثم تختفي. لا نعلم أنتم كقانونيين يعني ما هي الأمور التي يجب أنه المفاوض الكردي أن يتمسك بها حتى تنجح هذه العملية في تركيا. شكرا لكم.
I have the feeling that we have an unofficial interpreter in the room.
I was just making some notes about the question, so to not forget anything important about it. At first, John, he mentioned that despite all the process, that we got very happy with the process, but we are also hoping for some guarantees on the Turkish side that what can Turkey as a state can do to guarantee us that the process will guarantee our rights of cultural, linguistic, and other social rights as in the Kurdish society. And we also see that in the media every now and then the process would be glorified in the media. They would be everywhere, and then all of a sudden it goes away. And the main question here that he asked after this was, what could a Kurdish, the Kurdish delegation in the process, in the process, can hold on to make sure to guarantee the Kurdish rights, and what do we have to even hold on to? What are our cards as a Kurdish society against the Turkish state, and to make sure that Turkish state can guarantee us the constitutional rights.
Unfortunately, that is not to us to respond, honestly. It's to the courts to respond to this answer. I'm gonna be plain clear.
He also
Well,
mentioned
otherwise-
from your perspective as the lawyers and people very close to the process.
I think I agree with Urko. Like, since we do not have any Kurdish person sitting here with us, we are not in a position to answer this question. But what we can say is now it is time to question what the others are doing to support the process. Kurds are doing their part for years, legally, politically, whatever, they are doing their part. It is now our responsibility to support them. And this delegation's aim is making a modest contribution, but we are not in a position to tell them what to do. We are trying to learn from their efforts, I would say. And I see there is, no, okay, last one, yeah.
Okay, so as you follow up, the Council of Europe's meeting is coming on between 9 and 11. There will be an agenda about the right to hope as well. And since the right to hope documents has been given to the Council of Europe via the ECHR, still they keep delaying this by making any decision. Rather than that, we can clearly see the ECHR's decisions about Osman Kavala and Demirtas as well. But as we know, there is no any possibility for them to push Turkey for their inner system to change it and apply these decisions. So what will be what do you expect from the Council of Europe decisions about the right to hope, first of all, and to make it more clear for people to understand what will be your next step after this report? What else will you do? Thank you.
Okay, I can start, and then if colleagues want to fill in, feel free. Yeah, so when we talk about the right to hope in Öcalan's case before the European Court of Human Rights, we've entered into a really crucial moment for this. As you mentioned, and as my colleagues discussed previously, the court case for Mr. Öcalan dates back to 2014. It's been 12 years. And I think this is a good first place to start with how we address this topic, and that's to have such a case pending for so long. No, it took 10 years for this to even be brought on the agenda of the Committee of Ministers. It's a political topic. It's one that has a very distinct political nature, also in the way that it's been handled. So for the last 2 years, the topic has been brought on the agenda of the Committee of Ministers twice. And in the last discussion by the Committee of Ministers in September 2025, they gave Turkey until June to send an action plan detailing how they will implement the right to hope, how they will make the needed changes in law. We're getting very close to this deadline. And if they do not do so, or if there's not a concrete answer as to how that will happen, there needs to be some kind of stronger response on the part of European institutions and Council of Europe Committee of Ministers. The options for this can include infringement procedures. It can include other ways to both put pressure and support Turkey towards implementing the court's decisions. Council of Europe is a political institution. And so there's different options at their disposal. It's a question of political will as well. But that's given Öcalan's role within the current peace process, this is a key topic. And the right to hope then becomes a question of his individual case, but also important for the success and continuation of the peace process, more broadly speaking. We would hope that the topic comes on the agenda of the Committee of Ministers in September of this year, when they will meet again. As you said, and on the 9th, there will be one meeting of them where it will occur. It's not on the agenda, unfortunately. But for September, we would very much expect that it is discussed again and a more concrete stance is taken in this regard. You want to add?
I think it was a very good
That's
summary.
basically, the lawyers, we were not naive. This is not a legal, it's a political issue also. So we will need and require a legal and diplomatic combination of work to make this to happen. I think that for these colleagues are very aware of that. They will do their best and we will try to do our best. If we can make progress on that, it will depend on our capacity to mobilize legally and diplomatically as much as possible.
Thank you. So if we don't have any other questions, I think if like today, we will close the gathering and I want to thank to all of you again, once again for being here. And I also want to thank to my colleagues on behalf of European Association of Lawyers for Democracy and World Human Rights for joining this mission, for making it real with us. And we hope that we will get all of your support to disseminate this report, because we believe that it is not just an important documentation, but it is a very useful material to discuss the next necessary steps, that should be done, that should be made by Turkey, but also it gives a huge and strong idea for everybody, different way, like giving us the different opportunities to think about how to support this process. So thank you once again for being here.